What is up? Welcome to the DFS Academy for the final time of the 2025 season. Yes, we are in 2026, but it is still the 2025 season. We have reached the conference championships. 4 teams left. It's a 2-game slate, but we are well practiced at those. Let's build some lineups. Welcome to the DFS Academy. It is Conference Championship Week. I am your host, Ryan Weiss. With me, as always, Austin Amendolia. Austin, 21 episodes this season, this being the final one. It's been a hell of a run. You talked me into the playoffs. I've had a lot of fun doing these playoff shows, but sadly, as we reach 4 teams left, there may still be 1 episode left after this, not of this show, but of Oh Captain, My Captain, because there will only be 1 game left after this week. How are you doing this evening?
I'm good. I'm really happy I convinced you to hang around past week 18 this year.
Yeah.
So that we could do these playoff shows. I have a lot of fun with them. And, it's been a good year for the show, we should say, with this being our last episode. I mean, we had our first episode surpass 500 views. One of our episodes hit 300 last week. We really appreciate it. I mean, last year we were in the 20s to 40s most weeks.
We were doing the show for ourselves last year.
Yeah. But this year we were regularly surpassing that 100 view point and getting comments, people in the Discord. So it was a good year. Glad we got to build, and appreciate everyone who's tuned in this year.
Yeah, I'll just second that with Austin. We appreciate the hell out of the community. If you want to remain a part of this community after this show ends, jump into that Discord. You'll find the link in the description of this video. Austin is super active in there when it comes to DFS. We got our guy Hoove, who's super active in there with the NFL draft coming up. Josh is doing a great job moderating. I am terrible in the Discord, but if you ask me a question, I will answer it. Austin and I are already fielding fantasy baseball questions because he roped me in last year, and now all of a sudden I know shit about fantasy baseball. It's a really good time in the Discord. It's free. You should definitely jump in. But Austin, we have reached that time of year. I forgot to research if there's a Millie Maker. I'm going to be perfectly honest, because I wouldn't be playing in it. I assume there's a $25 Millie Maker, but with this small of a slate, there may not be. But Austin, we are down to the final 4 teams. It is New England traveling to Denver. It is the Rams traveling to Seattle. Before we get into these games, and we will be following the exact same method we did last week, we will break these games down into individual games and tell you how we like them as a total slate together. Austin, I think you guys may be breaking them down individually for Oh Captain, My Captain, but we will be looking at this as a slate. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but more importantly, tell folks how we kind of attack a 2-game slate.
Yeah, that is right. So not only will you have this episode breaking down kind of the slate overall, Josh Hudson and I will release 2 episodes of Oh Captain, My Captain, where we will talk about if you want to play the showdown version of each of these games, which it is important it is a different strategy because I'm in that situation. You don't have lineup restrictions of what positions you need to play. You have a captain spot that adds 1.5x the times the points of the player that you put in that position. So there's different strategy that happens there. And those shows will be distinct from this episode. But in terms of how to attack this slate, I mean, in general, and we've talked about this a lot in previous episodes, like with this being a 2-game slate and also just the teams in general, like there are 2 huge names on the slate that are probably going to be in every lineup, and you should probably just go with it.
Hit the chalk. If they fail, everybody fails. If they hit, everybody hits. It's all about what you can do with the rest of your money.
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be players that they're going to be plays that lineups you have where the players just don't work out, and you still may have a really successful lineup. So the way I kind of wanted to talk about this week is to actually look back to some of the 2-game slates last week, even the 4-game slate. So last week I placed 38th in a tournament of nearly 6,000 contestants.
Wow.
It got me a whole whopping $9.50 because it was a $1 contest.
So that's what tournaments do for you. You 9 extra money though.
I 9X'd my money. But the thing that was interesting about it is I finished 38th in that lineup, and I had Troy Franklin.
Wow.
Who got 0 fantasy points last week. I had Davante Adams in my lineup, who had 4.4 fantasy points. The winning lineup in that contest was just 20 points ahead of me, also had Davante Adams. So all that to say, like, you don't have to bat 1,000 in these contests because it's only 2 games. And honestly, like, the way that you're going to focus on getting different is going to be more about how you build your roster, how much you're stacking into certain teams and leaning into certain games. And it may take just like 1 or 2 really good picks that helps shoot you up the board. Like that winning lineup for the 4-game slate last weekend had Stephon Diggs, who was only 9% rostered and had 14 points. Like, that ended up being a pretty meaningful difference maker. They also played Rhamondre Stevenson, who was just 12.5% rostered, scored 12 points. So those 2 guys right there, they were difference makers. But it's also on the flip side, like, if you don't play, like, it's really easy to get buried in these contests if you don't play some of the chalk. Now, I will say another interesting thing from this lineup from last week, as I'm talking about it more, they played both. They played Kenneth Walker and Kyron Williams, and so they smashed on their running backs. And I think those 2 running backs are going to be an interesting conversation this week because they play each other. And typically you wouldn't want to play those 2 running backs against each other because the game script that makes it happen is kind of gross. But in this situation, that might be the way to go about it because it sort of, what matters less. There's only 2 other teams that they need to outrun.
Yeah.
Right? There's fewer ways for it to go sideways for you. So they need to perform. They need to do less to get you there from a fantasy production perspective.
Yeah, and I was going to bring this up later, but it's such a good point you make with the running backs. And this feels like the right time to mention it. It seems in the playoffs, and we kind of noted this in previous shows, teams have just stopped using their backup running backs. They're just like, we're going with the starters. And now Seattle has no choice in the matter. So to your point of, there's only so many ways it can go wrong. When you look at these 4 running backs, those 2 probably have the toughest matchup, but they probably still have the highest scoring potential as well, just because of who's on the other side. And we're going to get into all that in a moment. But it's just like, there's a much bigger gap to be had, I think, at like wide receiver than there is at running back and possibly even quarterback with some interesting names on the slate. So
yeah, I totally feel that. I mean, we'll get into this, but I feel like running back in some ways like might not even really matter that much this week. In a way that I think quarterback could, but it'll be really about getting the receivers and the tight ends right.
Yeah, let's get into it. The slate, as I mentioned, 2 games. New England traveling to Denver. Denver with the number 1 seed. Suffered some catastrophe last week. We'll talk about in a moment. New England is a 5.5 point favorite on the road. 42.5 over under on this game. That is an implied total of 24 for New England, 18 for Denver. The late game is the Rams traveling to Seattle. Seattle was the 1 seed, so they got to keep their home field. Rams are still a 2.5 point favorite. Over under on this game, 5 points higher, 47.5. That is an implied total of 25 for the Rams, 22.5 for the Seattle Seahawks. Let's break down that first game. Now, Austin, I should have known this. I meant to look it up. Is it Saturday, Sunday, or are they both playing on the same day?
They're both playing Sunday.
Okay, so they're both on Sunday, which makes sense. You don't want anybody having an extra break. So the early game on Sunday then is New England at Denver. As I mentioned, the Pats come into this game 5.5 point favorite, and that is all because of what happened at the end of Denver's victory last week against the Buffalo Bills. If you have not heard, Bo Nix did something to his ankle. I don't remember. Broke a bone. He will not be playing football for the remainder of this season. So Jarrett Stidham will be the quarterback for the Denver Broncos. Drake Maye, $6,000, I believe the most expensive quarterback on the slate. Oh no, actually Stafford's higher. So Drake Maye sitting at 6,000, Jarrett Stidham sitting at 4,500. Austin, I think we need to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is Jarrett Stidham. I think most conventional players are going to go into this and say, I am not building a Jarrett Stidham lineup. You and I did the research independently, and both maybe have a different opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny to me that Jarrett Stidham is like becoming a topic of conversation in the AFC Conference Championship game, especially because like there are these players that, like if you play dynasty football, there'll be these random names that pop up sporadically and you get excited about them. You add them to your team. Jarrett Stidham was one of those guys for me because when he played for the Broncos and backup a couple years back, it was like, oh, did pretty decently. And then suddenly it was like when he came back to Denver, it was like, oh, Sean Payton like Jarrett Stidham. And then they drafted Bo Nix and that all went sideways. But
for about 4 days, people thought Jarrett Stidham could have been the starter for the Denver Broncos last year.
Yeah, but obviously it didn't happen. No, I mean, for me, I'm like, don't get carried away with it. But I think you can play Jarrett Stidham. And it definitely, I'm not going to like do it in every lineup, but I think there are some serious cases for it. So first off, he has averaged at least 12 points in all 4 of his previous starts. Now it's been a minute since he's had a start.
I actually looked this up. So Jarrett Stidham's last pass thrown was January 7th of 2024. It has been 2 years and 14 days since Jarrett Stidham has thrown in a and I use the term meaningful loosely here because his last game was a week 18 matchup against the Raiders. It has been 2 years and 14 days since Jarrett Stidham has thrown a live action pass in the NFL. But Austin, where you're about to go with this, I agree with, because when you look at the numbers, he's not terrible.
He's not terrible. So 12 points. He actually does have a 20-point performance in his resume as well, because he has 2 games back from when he played with Denver where he rushed for 30 and 50 yards. So we've seen that he will use his legs. And the thing is, he is $4,500. So 12 points, you could do a lot worse at $4,500. And for me, I think it is a really easy pathway to play Puka Nacua and Jaxon Smith-Njigba in the same lineup, which I think people are going to want to do. And most of the time, if you're doing that, you're going to have to get really weird at receiver or play like Velus Jones at your running back spot. And I'm less interested in that because a guy like Velus Jones, he might get 6 carries for 10 yards. Whereas Jarrett Stidham, if he throws 150 yards, a touchdown, and maybe runs a touchdown in, like, okay, like you're getting there. And the other thing for me about this, within the context of this slate, there's a world in which he is competitive with the other quarterbacks from a fantasy output perspective, because the Denver Broncos defense is good and they're going to be motivated to show up for their team because they don't want to say, oh, well, we lost our quarterback and that's the reason 100%. We didn't make it to the championship. They're going to want to show out. So if they shut down Drake Maye, and if you can see a world where Sam Darnold throws a few interceptions and that limits his fantasy ceiling, where the Seattle Seahawks defense shuts down Matt Stafford like they did the first time they played the Rams this year. And suddenly you're like, wow, there wasn't really a difference in the fantasy output of the quarterbacks in this matchup, but there was a price difference, and that can be really meaningful for your lineup.
And that's the last kind of point I wanted to make is when you look at Stidham's 4 starts, and as we've mentioned, they were a while ago, 200 yards in every single one of those starts, at least 1 touchdown in every single one of those starts. Austin, the guys who played last week didn't do that. Sam Darnold did throw a touchdown. He had 124 yards. Matt Stafford did not throw a touchdown last week. He did have 258 yards. Drake Maye threw 3 touchdowns, only 179 yards. Austin, of the 3 remaining quarterbacks, none of them scored more than 14 fantasy points last week. So we are in a situation where you're saying, 12 points ain't bad. I'm sorry, it's 17 on DraftKings. I was looking at regular scoring, but regardless, we're saying 12 points ain't bad. 12 points could make him the second highest scoring quarterback on the slate for easily the cheapest salary by a large margin.
Yeah. And so for me, again, I'm not playing him in 100% of my lineups, but I will have a Jarrett Stidham lineup because it feels too there's definitely the clear pathway there. And I think people, to your point at the top of this, people are going to play Drake Maye, Matt Stafford, and maybe Sam Darnold, and they're going to say, I'm not playing Jarrett Stidham. And
100%.
We'll talk about the reason that might be a good case in a minute, but I'm not going to just not play him. I want to have him in at least one of my lineups.
I'm going to be honest. I was thinking about this, and we'll move on to running backs after this. We've talked recently where I'm starting to play a lot more of the max 3 entry tournaments, either single entry or max 3 entry tournaments. And if I'm building 3 separate entries, if I'm not going all in on a Drake Maye entry week, Sam Darnold is the quarterback I'm leaving out. And we'll talk about that in the next game. He has just been so disappointing for the last 5 weeks of football. There's no reason for me to build a lineup around Sam Darnold. Jaxon Smith-Njigba has proven he can get there without Sam Darnold getting there. So
yeah, I'm totally with that. I mean, especially given the price difference, it's $1,000 cheaper for Stidham. And he out of all the quarterbacks on this slate, Darnold is the one he can easily outperform. Drake Maye and Matt Stafford, they have more upside. So you could get buried by one of them. And so we should say you should also play Drake Maye. I'm not saying don't play Drake Maye.
Yeah.
Because he could easily be the quarterback you need and he can bury you completely. But also don't overlook Jarrett Stidham.
Yeah, and I think the only concern with Drake Maye is not a Drake Maye issue. It's a Denver defense issue because they have been very good this season. 12 fantasy points last week for the defense. We can talk about that obviously later. But more importantly, 5 takeaways last week, a big reason that they upset, and I use upset loosely, that they beat the Buffalo Bills. 10 QB hits. They only actually registered 3 stacks, but getting after Drake Maye is going to be a little bit easier than getting after Josh Allen. I guess maybe not. As I'm saying this out loud, I'm like, no, Drake Maye is just as elusive as Josh Allen. But regardless, the only reason to be concerned about Drake Maye is really to be concerned about the Denver defense at home.
Yeah, I think that's true because we did see that the Denver defense was able to force Josh Allen into mistakes, and I feel like that's very possible this week. I mean, we did see.
I mean, he was the number 1 quarterback on the slate last week. Don't get me wrong. 26 fantasy points for Josh Allen. So.
Yeah, which is wild when you say that because it's wow, how great could it have been without this turnovers? But we also saw the Houston Texans defense get after Drake Maye, and so we know that offensive line is vulnerable. It was actually kind of weird to me watching the game coverage for this because the commentators were like, oh yeah, look how great the New England Patriots are doing at protecting the edges. And I was like, you just showed a replay of Drake Maye getting strip sacked in the pocket, and he fortunately recovered the ball. So I don't know what was going on with that, but point being, the offensive line was gettable. The Denver Broncos defense is good. So there is a way that you can shut down Drake Maye. There's also a way where he just goes nuclear and he gets 20, 25 points for this team. We also know he'll rush a touchdown into the end zone. So you should definitely lean into that upside in addition to getting some Jarrett Stidham in your lineup.
Yeah. And I'll end it with real quick because you brought it up that we saw Houston getting after Drake Maye. 5 sacks last week, 5 sacks the week before against the Chargers as well. The Patriots having some offensive line problems. As I mentioned earlier, backup running backs have become increasingly irrelevant as the fantasy playoffs have progressed. When we look at the starters for these teams, you have Rhamondre Stevenson, $6,000. RJ Harvey just $100 behind at $5,900. The backups fall back. You got $5,500 at Treyveon Henderson, Jaleel McLaughlin at $4,400, and Tyler Beatty at $4,200. Austin, we've reached this moment where the whole world thought, 7 weeks ago that Treyveon Henderson was going to take over this backfield. The New England Patriots did not see it this way. This is a RJ Harvey versus Rhamondre Stevenson battle.
Yeah, I definitely think that Rhamondre Stevenson is the lead back in terms of touches. I still want to play Treyveon Henderson though this week because of that, because for Henderson, it's not his backfield, but he has the home run hitting ability that I think Stevenson lacks.
Yeah. It's just, does he break it off? Because he had 12 carries last week. He just did nothing with them. So
exactly. And so for me, because he will likely be the lowest rostered of the viable running backs in this, I'm interested in leaning into that. Because different. if he pops off 2 long touchdowns, that's all he needs. He needs 2 long plays to really get there. Especially if it's a larger field contest, that's where I'm more interested in Henderson. But we mentioned it at the top. I can see a world in which running back doesn't really matter that much this week because there's maybe 1 or 2 running backs that can really separate in this game. So I don't mind playing either Stevenson or Harvey. The thing I will say in favor of Harvey, I'm a little bit down on Stevenson because the Broncos are just a good defense.
Yeah.
But on Harvey's side of the ball, looking back at Jarrett Stidham, we've seen that he will dump the ball off pretty consistently to the running backs. And so I think that sets up really well for RJ Harvey. In his 4 starts, Jarrett Stidham has had 13, 8, 3, and 5 targets to the running backs. What I will say is those 13 and 8 numbers were with the Denver Broncos. So there's some interesting, well, I'll talk about this a little bit in like assessing Jarrett Stidham's game, but there's some interesting splits between his 2 games with Denver and his 2 games with Las Vegas, where and this is one of them where with Denver, he was dumping it off a ton to the running backs. A little bit less so with the Vegas Raiders, and we'll see we'll talk about in a second. He also targeted his wide receiver 1 differently in his Denver starts versus his Las Vegas Raiders starts. I don't know if that's like development over time because he was with the Raiders more recently than he was with the Broncos, or if it's just something about the personnel around him. But he has shown a potential to really target those running backs. And so RJ Harvey could easily be a beneficiary of that because of how utilized he already is in the pass game.
I read something interesting today, Austin. I'm catching you off guard with this. JK Dobbins could actually be activated for this week. Does that give us any concern? I don't think it does out of a pass catching sense because RJ Harvey has really established himself as a pass catching back. But I just wonder if, obviously he's not on the slate yet because he hasn't been activated yet. If JK Dobbins is back, I can't imagine you're rushing to play him. Let's just assume he's coming in at slightly under Treyveon Henderson's salary. If he's added, are you scared off of RJ Harvey at all?
Probably not. I probably would hope that other people would be scared off of RJ Harvey and just stick with RJ Harvey and hope I'm getting less rostership out of it. It's very rare that we see players come back from injury like that and get a full workload the first game back. So I don't feel super concerned about that.
Yeah, I just figured Denver has to feel like they're pulling out all the stops at this point because, they lost Bo Nix with 1 game left in their season, hopefully 2 if you're a Broncos fan. And then let's just kind of wrap this up with Rhamondre Stevenson. Not as effective last week, Austin, as he was the week before. Still over 4 yards a carry, 16 carries for 70 yards, still involved in the passing game, just didn't find the end zone, which is really what kind of hurt him last week. That was against the Houston defense, the Denver defense. They're much better against the pass than they are a run. Is Rhamondre Stevenson, I'm going to use this term, is he the bad kind of chalk this week where his ceiling might be slightly capped because of the upside we like from the other guys, and he might be the one you're looking to maybe avoid?
I could see it both ways, honestly. And I feel like you could play kind of either of the New England Patriots running backs and it'd be fine. I mean, I honestly could see a lot of the rostership going to Kyron Williams and Kenneth Walker and people just being fine with that, or people picking one of the 2 of them and then RJ Harvey on the other side. I feel like the fact that you have Stevenson and Henderson in the same backfield does reduce their overall rostership in general. And so I'm fine kind of picking and choosing between the 2. I think it's I think I can make a case for either one. Stevenson has the volume, and to your point, if he gets in the end zone, it's there. Henderson has the big play ability. So I'm fine mixing and matching, especially if you're doing multi-entry contest. I frankly, if you have a lineup you really like, and you just want to switch the 2 of them, you could probably do it from a salary standpoint. You might as well. And also I don't know, you could see a world where this game gets out of hand and maybe both of them have a decent day. I feel like we have seen that kind of week where they both have really good upside. So I don't mind getting creative with how you attack the New England Patriots running backs.
All right, let's get at these wide receivers. Stephon Diggs, 5,800. Courtland Sutton, 5,700. Troy Franklin, 4,700 is coming into this game questionable. Kayshon Boutte drops down to 4,500. Pat Bryant, also questionable, but 4,400. Marvin Mims, who led the team in receiving last week, 4,200. Demario Douglas has gotten more involved in these playoffs, 3,600. Kyle Williams at 3,500. And Lil Jordan Humphrey, who I believe is also now questionable, looking at 3,400. Austin, you mentioned that things get interesting, and I'll be honest, I built one lineup before we did the show today, and my immediate instinct was to avoid the Broncos wide receivers. I don't hate Jarrett Stidham. I have no idea who he's going to pass the ball to.
Well, I think that's actually very wise because for me, there's something really notable about Jarrett Stidham's history. When he played with the Broncos and he was the starter, Courtland Sutton was incredibly unproductive with him, like getting like 1 or 2 catches in a single game. And that was it. What's weird is that when Stidham was in Vegas, he targeted Davante Adams super heavily.
Yeah.
And so that was a case where he was finding his number 1 target. Now, Davante Adams is much better than Courtland Sutton. Like Courtland Sutton's a respectable receiver, don't get me wrong, but Davante Adams is clearly the better receiver in that
and
situation.
Certainly when we're talking that many years ago, because we're talking 3 to 4 years ago for Sutton and 3 to 4 years ago for Adams, and back then the gap was even wider between those two. So
exactly. So for me, like I don't really know exactly what to make of that, but we've seen that he has a history of bad chemistry, I guess, with Courtland Sutton not getting him the ball a ton.
Yeah.
Also, like Sutton probably gets the Christian Gonzalez treatment, and the Patriots probably say, you know what, little Jordan Humphrey, if you're going to beat me, you're going to beat me. And because of that, I am actually interested in Humphrey this week because also interesting in Stidham's history is he has targeted little Jordan Humphrey a lot in some of his Denver games. So there's some history there, and I feel like that could be a way to go pending the injury report. Depends on what happens with Troy Franklin.
Okay, so that's Bryant. What we're watching on the injury report is what's happening. Because I was wrong about Humphrey being questionable, but it's the guys in front of him that could be the issue here. So
exactly. So I could see a world where if Pat Bryant and Troy Franklin sit, I mean, we saw them get gadgety with Humphrey last week, and Stidham has a history with him. So I could see stacking him that way. For me, like to your point with the receivers, like the way I might attack this for my Jarrett Stidham lineups is I might go Stidham, RJ Harvey, and then either Mims or Humphrey and call it good. And I feel like if you're double stacking Jarrett Stidham, you're getting different enough right off the bat that you can play a lot of the chalk in the late slate. And if that works out for you, you just stay on the chalk and who knows, you end up winning.
Yeah, I think the most terrifying thing about this is we're going into this completely blind. Stidham didn't play week 18 because they needed to win to get the 1 seed. He has not thrown a pass in 2 years. We can't guess at what this offense is going to look like. We want him to come out and beat Bo Nix, but let's be honest, Bo Nix was really hit and miss this season. So again, I mean, Bo Nix was the QB1, I believe, last week, or QB2 behind Josh Allen. But regardless, this is an offense that has been kind of spotty, and now there's just so many more question marks.
Yeah, but I'm such a sicko because you say all that, and I'm like, yeah, I love it. I'm so here for the unpredictability of it, and like ready to just play him and see what happens.
It's where you find the edge, Austin. I think things get almost less interesting in this game as we move over to the tight ends. Hunter Henry sitting at 4,800, Evan Ingram at 3,300. I say less interesting because these are teams that are not using their tight ends a lot, even for the starters. And then you get into the bench. Austin Hooper at 2,500. We joked about Adam Troutman last week. I think he had the second most targets out of the tight ends. He just did nothing with them at 2,500. Nate Adkins is also rock bottom at 2,500. He's interesting because they run him out of fullback a lot. And so that could be a new type of offense they're going to run with this inexperienced quarterback back there.
Yeah, what's interesting is I did notice that Jarrett Stidham targets the tight ends a decent amount in his history, regardless of top. This was the one place where he was consistent. He was like, oh yeah, tight ends are my friends. But even with that, I'm probably sticking with more of the chalky tight ends on this slate. Yeah. I think Hunter Henry is far and away has the best opportunity, best matchup in this situation. And so I'm happy to play him. I don't mind playing Austin Hooper in a large field if I'm trying to get different because we've seen Hooper score touchdowns. But we saw last week, Dalton Kincaid got there from a fantasy perspective. He scored over 20 DraftKings points. Dawson Knox was like a slightly more accurate pass away from scoring a touchdown at the end of that game, and that would have gotten him above into the double-digit threshold.
If he had actually scored that touchdown, he would have been the tight end 2 on the week behind only Kincaid.
Exactly. I mean, the Broncos of the 4 teams left, they've given up the most points to tight ends. So for me, like both Henry and Austin Hooper are in play, especially when you think about the fact that the receivers are going to probably get the Pat Surtain treatment, and so Drake Maye is going to need to be looking a little bit more over the middle of the field to find those tight ends.
I guess just what scares me is just how bad tight ends were in general last week. Only Kincaid and Kmet got over 10 points, and Komet did it, as everybody saw, on a Hail Mary at the end of the game. Like, Komet was worthless until catching that pass. That was I think he scored 12 fantasy points. I think that was an 8-point pass for his fantasy points. But when I look at these guys, Austin, Evan Ingram, 1 catch for 7 yards. Hunter Henry, 1 catch for 5 yards. Now, Henry was obviously very good the week before, and New England's a smart enough team that they're going to take what the defense gives them. New England doesn't necessarily have the talent at wide receiver to beat this great secondary we've talked about. I think there's a chance this is a game where Hunter Henry does surprise people a little bit. So,
yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's kind of my thinking about this too. Like, I worry about the receiver's ability to consistently beat the cornerbacks on this matchup, but I think Hunter Henry can get there on volume, and I expect him to probably at least score a touchdown.
There we go. As we slide over to the defenses, you got 2 of the best. I mean, no surprise here. We're talking about, honestly, 4 of the best defenses in football and 4 of the best defenses in fantasy football. I remember this season, Patriots and Seahawks, Austin, we're going to talk about them in a little bit, were 2 of the defenses I love to target because of what they also offered you in the return game. And we saw that from Seattle very quickly last week. So we come into this week with the Patriots at 3,500, the Broncos all the way down at 2,500. And Austin, I haven't even read your notes on this yet, if you even have notes. Putting the Broncos as the cheapest defense on the slate because they don't have a quarterback feels like a mistake on DraftKings' part. And I think the Broncos are a team that I'm going to be very happy to start. As I mentioned, Drake Maye sacked 10 times in these playoffs already.
Yeah, and I mean, the Broncos have been playing really well in their past couple of games. I'm very much with you on that front, where I think that the Denver Broncos are going to be likely overlooked in a way that they shouldn't be in this matchup. I mean, let's just remind ourselves last week, Denver forced Josh Allen to turn over the ball 3 times. The 4th one he did on his own.
5 times. Well, Allen 3 times, the team 5 times, but yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And one of them was his just own fault. They didn't make that happen, but they took advantage of it. We saw Drake Maye put the ball on the turf a lot. That game was messy. Now, that one was cold and there was snow in the area, but still, we saw that Drake Maye can give the ball up. So for me, I'm like, yeah, if Denver can force Josh Allen to turn into a little bit of a pumpkin, which we talked about, by the way, last week, there was a possibility of that. They could do it again this week. And, from a fantasy perspective, if you had played Josh Allen and the Denver Broncos defense last week, nobody would have said to do that. Denver Broncos defense scored 12 points. Josh Allen scored 25 points. That's pretty good from both of those players.
That worked.
You can play Drake Maye and you can play the Denver Broncos defense in this type of situation where it's only 2 games. That's one of the rules you can easily break this week and it work out.
Yeah, understanding how fantasy defenses score, it gives you an edge here. So don't be afraid to play a very good defense as the cheapest defense on the slate. Austin, before we move on to the NFC side of things, anything about this game I didn't give you a chance to mention?
Well, I just want to say, like, with the New England Patriots defense side as well, like, they will probably be very chalky, and it makes sense because Jarrett Stidham will put the ball in harm's way. And, he, in those 4 games, I was looking at his game logs, he recorded an interception or a fumble in most of them, and he also took a ton of sacks. He had a 5-sack game in one of his 4 starts. So New England, obviously a good pick. They will be chalky. But also keep in mind, part of the reason I probably will fade them a little bit is the Denver Broncos offensive line is better than the Houston Texans offensive line. And so I do think that there might be some less opportunities there because that Denver offensive line, I mean, they might be the best offensive line remaining in the playoffs. I mean, maybe you could say the Seahawks is up there as well, but Broncos have a really solid offensive line. So it may be less opportunities for turnovers, but they'll still be a chalky defensive play.
Yeah, it's a situation where we're going to talk about it a lot as we get into this next game, that JSN and Puka Nacua are chalk, but they are chalk with slate breaking potential.
Yeah.
No offense to the New England defense. Very few defenses have slate breaking potential. And if they don't score a touchdown, a great game from New England gets you 15 points, whereas a bad game from Denver gets you like 8 points. We're talking a 7-point differential for $1,300 savings in salary. I'm not paying up for the defense this week, plain and simple.
Yeah, I don't blame you for that.
Yep. Moving on. Over to the NFC, the Rams traveling to Seattle. 3rd time they faced each other this season. The Rams are 2.5-point favorites, even though they are on the road. The over-under in this game, 47.5. That is 25 points implied for the Rams, 22 points implied for the Seattle Seahawks. Austin, we got almost a similar quarterback battle, which is, yes, me disparaging the name of Sam Darnold, who has just been nothing for fantasy as of late. Matt Stafford, most expensive quarterback on the slate at 6,300. Darnold at 5,500. I've already told you my thoughts on Darnold. If I'm avoiding one quarterback on this slate, it's Sam Darnold. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame you for that, because the biggest question I have, I mean, geez, I'm looking at his game log too right now. Yeah. He hasn't scored double-digit fantasy points on DraftKings the past 3 weeks. Yeah. And like, I think that's part of the formula for the Seahawks team too. Like, I think that's kind of how they want to play it. Now, I will say the last time he did score double-digit fantasy points was against the Rams.
Looking at that myself.
He scored 21 points in that game, and he needed to. So to me, it's like, how do you think this game goes? And I think that will dictate whether or not you play Sam Darnold. One thing is, like, he's thrown multiple interceptions in both games against the Rams so far. So you should just go ahead and bake that into your emotional assumptions of how this is going to go. But I could see a world where it's like this is the same it was last time, where the Rams are actually able to get after the Seahawks defense. They're the only offensive that has been able to do that. And it forces Sam Darnold to have to throw the ball a lot. And he gets there on a volume basis, and is able to score a couple of touchdowns along the way. Because that's part of the thing. The interesting thing about that is that game against the Rams, that's the last time that Sam Darnold completed over 30 passes in a game, because he hasn't needed to, right? Like, that's how good their defense and their run game has been. But they may need to more in this game if the Rams are able to push them. Now, on the flip side, the first time these two teams played,
awful.
Sam Darnold threw 4 interceptions and he didn't score a touchdown. And so you didn't need him there. So, and I think both of those outcomes are possible. You know, like, that's the weird thing about Sam Darnold. So he's not going to be my top quarterback by any means, but I'm not going to wholesale not play him the way that you're suggesting, Ryan.
That's just where I paid a lot of attention to Sam Darnold this season, mainly because I'm an advocate for streaming quarterbacks, and he was always available. Always. Yeah. And Austin, I make a top 5 list every week. I just never saw the ceiling to even fit him into my top 5. I'm like, no, I'd rather gamble on Bryce Young than tell someone to start Sam Darnold. And Austin, a lot of the mindset behind streaming positions plays into these smaller DFS slates, and Sam Darnold is the one I'm avoiding, plain and simple. I don't see the ceiling.
I mean, I totally get it. Like, if you're playing only 3 lineups this week, I totally get how Sam Darnold ends up not being the quarterback you don't play. I will say, what I could see myself doing, depending on the sequence in which I build lineups this week. We've talked about the underdog drafts before. I could see myself drafting a lineup on underdog.
Being the last guy to take your quarterback and just letting him happen.
Yeah, and see who it is. Would people rather play?
I'll tell you who it. I this is how down I am on Sam Darnold. I have already convinced myself he would be the last one, forgetting that Jarrett Stidham exists. But no, that's a really good point. It's just because, as if you've never heard us talk about these drafts, nobody can snipe you. You have to get a quarterback. Yeah, there's no one's drafting 2. So you're going to get one of these guys. It's interesting, Austin.
Yeah. And actually, by ADP right now, I mean, you would get Stidham. So just looking at underdog ADP,
I'd rather have Stidham. I'd rather have Stidham and whoever I was able to get earlier in the draft to not take Sam Darnold.
Yeah, which definitely with the ADP difference too, it's like a 10-point ADP difference. It's
interesting.
Like, okay, I would take Stidham and risk my luck. Anyways, so that's like a side tangent, but yeah, point being, I see a case for playing Sam Darnold, but I agree with you that I'm not going to bend over backwards to make it happen.
Yeah. On the other side of this, Austin, we're probably looking at a very chalky Matt Stafford.
Yeah, I could see him. It's going to be tight between him and Drake Maye on who is the most roster quarterback. I can't tell if people are going to downgrade Drake Maye because of how tough the Denver Broncos defense is, or if they're going to upgrade Matt Stafford because he threw for 450 yards the last time he played the Seattle Seahawks. But either way, I really I feel fine playing either of the quarterbacks. I think Matt Stafford, like he's going to be a sure thing. And I think you could still get your lineup different elsewhere. But as we mentioned with Drake Maye, I think Stafford is one of the few quarterbacks on this slate that could actually bury you. So I think it would be a mistake to not play a lineup with Stafford and a lineup with Drake Maye because of the upside for those two guys. And there's not really much bad I can say about Matthew Stafford, except I will flag he did bang up his hand a couple of games ago against the Panthers, and you saw him working through that. And I don't know how much that has lingered, but we've known him to work through injury before.
Yeah, he didn't look great last week. So
he also got lucky on 2 fumbles last week, where he fumbled the ball twice. They were not recovered by the Chicago Bears defense, but he put the ball in harm's way. And then arguably he threw a pick to Davante Adams, depending on how much you believe the rules.
Depending on if you're a Bills fan or not.
Yeah.
What a mess.
But point being, like, he is vulnerable too. So you could see him like hitting the floor, but I think he's one of the safer bets. And so between him and Drake Maye, I think the two of them like combining for 60% rostership would not shock me at all.
Yeah. As we move on to the running backs here, we mentioned the catastrophe suffered by Denver. Seattle suffered their own catastrophe. Zach Charbonnet tore an ACL, if I remember correctly, will not play for the remainder of the playoffs. So we got, for the Rams, Kieran Williams, 6,500. Kenneth Walker, just slightly less, 6,200. Austin, these guys were the best 2 running backs in fantasy last week, and now they're facing off against each other. Blake Corum, who looked like he was going to be a thing for a bit this season, has disappeared in the playoffs. He's sitting at 5,000. Zach Charbonnet is 5,200 if you want to burn money, by the way. And then Velus Jones, Austin, you mentioned him earlier in the show, and I'm going to be honest. I did not realize he had even converted to running back. I was one of those people with my like 5th round pick in dynasty drafts years ago. Added Velus Jones everywhere. He was an older rookie. Nobody liked him. I knew he was a gadget guy. Did not know that he had converted running back. And I'm guessing right now he plays for Seattle, which is the only reason we're even talking about him. But Austin, obviously the talent here is at the top of the lineup. And Austin, I think the biggest issue with this game specifically is we're going to talk in a second about how these wide receivers are chalk. You can't play both these wide receivers and both these running backs. It's a lineup that's going to look very ugly and probably not do what you want it to do.
Why not?
Okay.
I mean, I think you can because people are not going to want to do it. Like,
well, that's for sure. That's just lineup building 101 is that you don't play the 4 best players from one game because it's very unlikely they all get through.
But like, yeah, and I agree with that. And that's why I think it is actually like, it is potentially viable this week. Now, I think there are some ways you can do it a little bit differently, but I think like in these 2 game slates, like we talk a lot about just breaking your typical rules of DFS. Like you're right. You would not typically stack both sides of a running back wide receiver matchup. I just like, that's not how game flows typically work, but I don't know. The Denver Broncos defense might score 0 points and the Denver Broncos as a team might score 0 points. The Denver Broncos defense might hold Drake Maye to 12 points. And then it's like, well, dang, all the scoring happened in the later game. And that's how you get there.
I'm just doing the math real quick on this. It looks like $29,700 of your $50,000 salary would be lined up in these 4 players. But hey, you do that with the Denver Broncos defense and Jarrett Stidham. It's an interesting, it's honestly the lineup I'm probably going to build when we get off the show today, just to see what it looks like. Austin, if you were fading any of these guys, who would it be between Kieran and Kenneth Walker?
Yeah, I think I am more likely to fade the Rams running backs in general. And when I say that, I mean, it mostly impacts Blake Corum. Like, I think I'm highly unlikely to play Corum because
he's done nothing in the playoffs. They've just forgotten about him. And again, he had some carries against Carolina back in week 1, but I feel like he did nothing in week 2 of the postseason.
Yeah, but to the point, I mean, we talked about this last week. It feels like these teams went in kind of like game management mode or a time management mode down the stretch, and that's why Corum got more run throughout the season. But now that we're in the playoffs, it's Kyren Williams. It's their best running back. And so I would definitely be fading Blake Corum. And then if I'm saying I'm only playing one of the two running backs in this game, I'll probably play Kenneth Walker over Kyron Williams because the matchup is just better. The Rams have given it up against the run. We saw them unable to run. It was hilarious. The broadcast kept being like, oh, Seattle Seahawks are going to run the ball to the right once again. And they did, and they were successful over and over again, and the Rams couldn't stop it.
And I'm not trying to, Austin, we talked about this last week with the Seahawks of what they were averaging per carry and per touch. It was just ridiculous.
So. Yeah. So you talk about a Rams defense that just gave it up to the Bears fairly consistently, and a Seahawks offense that is really good running the ball. I'm good to go with Kenneth Walker, but to the point we said, I don't mind playing Kenneth Walker and Kyron Williams both in my lineup. I think people are going to feel a little uncomfortable doing that, but I think there's definitely a case for it this week.
Yeah, it just goes against all your instincts of basic roster construction, but game theory wise, you're going to have a unique lineup. It feels like it's kind of forcing you to have a unique lineup.
Yeah, I mean, I could see most people playing Kenneth Walker and RJ Harvey and going about it that way. Yeah. But yeah, I could see playing both of them and feeling really good with it.
And Williams just continues to find the end zone, which is always a good thing when you're looking at fantasy running backs.
Yeah.
And moving on to the most popular position for this game, and probably, Austin, where, putting it bluntly, where this slate might be decided. Puka Nacua sitting at $9,000. Jaxon Smith-Njigba at $8,000. Davante Adams, a big drop down at $6,000. Rashid Shaheed, get them return points, $4,100. Cooper Kupp shows up out of nowhere last week, $3,800. Kenyatta Mumfield, I believe is his first name, $3,200. Jordan Whittington at $3,100. And Jake Bobo at $3,000. Austin, there's obvious chalk in this game, but that doesn't mean not to eat it.
Yeah, I mean, JSN and Puka Nacua are probably going to be the most popular plays in general. And I think playing them both in the same lineup is going to be pretty popular, and it should be. Like, the thing about this lineup is when you look at this game, this slate, when you look at the receivers, even if Puka Nacua and Jaxon Smith-Njigba only combine for 30 points, that still might make them the two best receivers on the slate. Like, yeah, there's just not a lot of other receivers that can really get there and dominate, and you expect to bury you in the situation. So to me, it makes total sense to just play both of them and forget it. But I'm not going to exclusively do that. I think there are some ways that you can play this differently. I will say, if you're saying that I am only playing either JSN or Puka Nacua, I'm probably picking JSN. I think he has the better upside here. I could see Puka Nacua getting a little bit outperformed by Jason in this situation, just because, like, I think that's going to be the way to stop the Rams offense in this situation, is if you can shut down Nacua, you start to make them go to some of their other options, and it gets a little bit more inconsistent. And I think that's going to be one of the keys for the Seahawks to win this game.
I just find it interesting that you asked yourself once, I asked you once, the same question for these two position groups, and we picked the Seahawk both times. I almost expected you to go Nacua, because game theory would say you start the running back from one team and the wide receiver from the other team. But fantasy wise, and like you said, I mean, you're also dealing with a better cornerback one on the Seattle side that could slow Puka Nacua down. Now, again, the Rams ate the last time they played this team, so it's unlikely. But if one thing is going to happen, it does seem more likely Puka is slowed down versus JSN. And let's not discount that there's a $1,000 salary difference between these two as well.
Yeah, no, that is true. Now, I say that, but if somebody wanted to argue with me and say play Puka Nacua over JSN, like, I'm not gonna like argue that hard for this.
Melina is going to be in the chat immediately after watching this episode and be like, "You guys are idiots. Play Puka Nacua."
And I'll just say, you know what? You're right. I am an idiot, because we do know Puka Nacua can also tear up this. Because also, the thing that the Rams did to be successful when they played the Seahawks the last time is they attacked the middle of the field, and that is where Puka Nacua gets a lot of his targets and is really productive. I just feel like the Seahawks are going to adjust. They're going to try and lock down Puka Nacua. And for me, from a game theory perspective, I'm really interested in playing Davante Adams this week because, boy, whenever there was that non-interception that I joked about a second ago, I decided to go see what Twitter was saying about Davante Adams. And to some degree, I expected to see like it all being about like, oh, how is that not an interception? And it was to some degree, but also scattered all throughout it was like, where's Davante Adams in this freaking game? I bet this over on like him to get 30 yards and he can't get there. Like
people were falling off a cliff the last few weeks.
Which, like, it makes a little bit of sense because he got banged up. But to me, I'm like, okay, if people are pissed at Davante Adams and they just saw him drop 4.4 DraftKings points in his in their lineups, I'm like, he's still one of the red zone threats here. If he scores 2 touchdowns in this game, is anyone going to be really that shocked? And so playing JSN and Davante Adams and that being my way of getting off of Puka Nacua, I'm very intrigued by that as a strategy this week.
I'm going to ask you about some flyer wide receivers, but before the chat comes from us, I have to mention what Puka Nacua did in week 16 against the Seattle defense because we sound like idiots. 12 catches, 225 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I believe it was, I only have standard PPR points right now in front of me, but it was 46.5 standard PPR points, which was 49.5 DraftKings points. So Austin, take our expectations for Puka Nacua with a grain of salt. We're just telling you one possibility of what could happen. There's also a chance he breaks the entire slate 2 times over.
Yeah, that's why I'll be playing multiple lineups, and a lot of them will have Puka Nacua. Yeah. One of them will not, though, at least, because, you know, if he...
Just in case.
Just in case.
Austin, you mentioned 2 dart throw wide receivers, but you didn't mention the resurgence of Cooper Kupp in this revenge game now. 5 catches last week. I think he only got 30 yards, but 5 catches or it might have been more yards than that. My apologies. But regardless, caught every ball thrown his way and all of a sudden was relevant for fantasy football. 5 catches for 50 yards or 60 yards last week. Cooper Kupp didn't make your radar. You want to go elsewhere. I'll be honest. The one lineup I built before we jumped on the show, Austin, Cooper Kupp was my flyer at wide receiver.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I was debating whether or not I was going to talk about Cooper Kupp. The issue that I have with him is he's only caught 5 balls 3 other times this year.
There you go.
So I'm like, is he really going to get there? You know, I did catch my attention that he was more utilized, and it was coming off of 2 weeks of rest. And so maybe he is more rested now too, and like still benefiting from that. And so that can kind of play in his favor and maybe helps him sort of continue to get that volume. So I can see a case there. It wasn't the most exciting route for me to go. Not,
because one of your guys is the most exciting, arguably the most exciting player on this entire slate. So.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, maybe you can play Cooper Kupp, but I'm more interested in playing Rashid Shaheed, in part because we saw last week, like, he always can return a touchdown, a kickoff return for a touchdown. But also like that his game style is the big play making ability. And we've seen him at times be really heavily targeted. And so for me, I'm interested to go his route, especially if people do steam up. If people do start to steam up Cooper Kupp this week and say, oh, well, maybe Cooper Kupp is back and Rashid Shaheed is fading.
Which is very likely because people are going to see the revenge game and all that stuff. And there's going to be a chance that Kupp is going to be the play over Shaheed. And let's be perfectly clear. If salary allows it, Shaheed is the play.
Yeah. And to the revenge game narrative standpoint, I mean, it's been a revenge game twice this year and it hasn't gone that well for Cooper Kupp. In either of the
over games. The hill and not the Cooper Kupp he once was.
Yeah, I mean, in that overtime game, he had extra time to get there. He caught 3 balls for 39 yards. In the first game, he had 3 catches on 7 targets for 23 yards. So
it's not 6 fantasy points
combined. No, each time. So yeah, maybe you get there, but I think Shaheed has more of the upside there.
Yep. And then just Jordan Whittington, what are your thoughts if you're taking a flyer on a Rams wide receiver?
It just caught my attention. He was getting a little bit involved again this past week. And I think if you're betting that Davante Adams is just like falling off the rest of the year, he's playing through injury, kind of out there as a decoy. Yeah. Maybe Jordan Whittington is a beneficiary of that. And he's not going to get a ton of volume. So this is definitely like large field only consideration for me. But it just was like, it seemed like there were a few times in the game last week where it's like, oh, it was interesting that you went to Jordan Whittington in that situation. And it made me think maybe there's some more opportunity opening up for him as we move through the playoffs.
Yeah, as we move on to the tight ends, Austin, I do not understand AJ Barner being the most expensive in this game at 4,000. No targets last week. But then you got the Rams trio at surprisingly still priced kind of disparate. I would have expected them to be closer. Colby Parkinson at 3,500, Tyler Higbee at 3,000, Terrence Ferguson at 2,700. Is it just throw a dart and pick a Rams tight end?
Yeah, I mean,
your salary.
It's been the same story every week for the Rams tight ends. It truly is to me like pick one of them. For me, I've been more on Higbee over the past few weeks because I feel like he's had the kind of sneaky upside potential. This week, I'm actually really interested in going towards Colby Parkinson because I think I wonder if people are going to ignore him this week because he didn't really get there from a fantasy perspective last week. We saw he was still getting the targets. He just had a couple of dropped balls. And I don't know, that game last week for the Rams, like, yeah, the Bears played. I mean, the Bears defense played a really damn good game, and that was part of it. But also, it was a really cold game for a Rams team that is a warm weather team, and we know that when weather is a consideration, sometimes drops go up, especially for teams that aren't used to playing in it. And so, for me, I'm like, if people are going to be down on Colby Parkinson this week, I kind of want to lean into him because we know he has that 2 touchdown upside. So he's kind of my favorite pick. Terrence Ferguson, I think, is another. Like you can throw him in large field stuff. I feel like he has like 2 touchdown upside that can really get you there. So I won't really prioritize him as much. He could fall into the end zone once. And so I think if you're betting on the tight end position just failing across the board this week, then Ferguson becomes an interesting option because you're saving salary.
No, that makes a ton of sense. Austin, bring us home in this game on the defense. Seattle Seahawks 3,300, Rams 2,800. Obviously, Seahawks have that weapon in Rashid Shaheed that gives you the extra aspect to the game. You're not just playing defense when you play the Seattle Seahawks defense. And
that is true. And so that's a good reason to play the Seahawks defense because and actually, as you say that, I'm making my take in real time because I was originally going to say just play one of them. Like that makes sense with your lineup. It doesn't really matter. But actually, I'm remembering that the Rams have had some special teams problems in recent weeks. They had a punt blocked recently, and we saw last week late in the game against the Bears because they were concerned about allowing another blocked punt. Yeah. They played a really conservative setup formation for their punt that gave the Bears really good field position. So the Rams are very aware that they are not great on special teams, but the Seahawks, that has been something that has been good for them. So I do think it is worth picking them over the Rams this week for that reason. And I mean, I do think that there's you could see a world where the defenses come out in a wash. And so if you're playing Matthew Stafford, Kyron Williams, 2 Rams receivers and a Rams tight end, and okay, don't play the Seattle Seahawks defense at that point. But if you're playing a more balanced lineup, then I think the Seattle Seahawks defense can get there easily.
There we go. That wraps up the conference championships. Austin, it has been a hell of a season, a hell of a show. Parting words for the guys and gals that tune in every week.
I mean, yeah, again, I really appreciate everyone that's tuned in and listened this year. And yeah, join us in the Discord. Make sure you stick around. Again, worst that goes, I'm going to start drafting best ball drafts as soon as they're available, basically. So there will be plenty of fantasy content to go around, plenty of DFS and best ball content to go around.
I have my first run of rookie rankings done already. I'm getting ready to put those up on the site. So.
Wow, you're very ahead of me on that front. I am going to work on my rookie rankings as well. Because again, I got to get ready for those best ball drafts. Got to know which rookies to draft.
Exactly. I love it. Thank you all so much for riding with us this entire season. Keep an eye out for Oh Captain, My Captain. I love that you're watching DFS Academy, but Austin will break down these two games in individual slates, and we'll have another one going for the Super Bowl. Jump into the Discord, follow Club Fantasy on all the socials. It's at Club Fantasy FFL, our flagship show, no pun intended, that comes on Wednesday nights live at 9:00. That's every week of the year. We do not take the off season off. We are going to be talking about accountability. Then we'll get into free agency and the rookies. It's going to be a really fun time. You want to be here with us. Thank you all for tuning in. Good luck setting your lineups. I hope the team you want to win the Super Bowl wins the Super Bowl, and good luck to the Denver Broncos, man. What a tough break to lose your quarterback. I'll be rooting for them just because of how bad this was, but we'll see how it goes. We will see you guys next season. Have a great one.